Picture the lights, the applause, and every camera in Hollywood pointed straight at you. You've kept your darkest secrets locked behind closed doors until, in a split second, a razor-sharp punchline cracks them wide open on live television. That's exactly what happened to Blake Lively when comedian Chelsea Handler took the stage and turned one of the industry's most explosive scandals into a jaw-dropping roast. In that single electrifying moment, the carefully spun narrative around Blake Lively began to unravel for millions to see, setting off a chain reaction of lawsuits, leaks, and shattered reputations.
I want to personally extend my gratitude to Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively. Thank you for providing us with that distraction. I'm grateful. I think we're all grateful. And I think we're good.
What really happened behind the scenes? And why did one innocent-looking joke ripple through Hollywood like a shockwave? Keep watching, because by the end of this story, you'll realize just how thin the line can be between stardom and Scandaland, how quickly that line can snap. Most fans knew Blake Lively as the stylish, polished movie star who graced red carpets and shared jokes with her husband on social media. But behind the scenes, something else was brewing. By the time the cameras cut away from Chelsea Handler's onstage jab, that something else was out in the open for the world to see. Lawsuits, leaked text messages, searing allegations.
Actor-director Justin Baldoni is now suing his former co-star Blake Lively and her husband Ryan Reynolds, seeking more than $400 million in damages, accusing them of defamation and extortion.
The moment that comedic roast became public knowledge, the internet roared to life headline after headline proclaiming Lively's meltdown, questions about her credibility, and a sea of onlookers wondering who was telling the truth. Was she a victim of powerful Hollywood forces protecting one of their own, or was she orchestrating a scandal to cover her own missteps? Keep watching, because the twists that followed are far more surprising than anyone guessed. Blake Lively's downfall didn't begin with a whisper. It started with a roar. The audience erupted in laughter, but many who were tuned in sensed a heavier undercurrent. This wasn't Handler's usual playful jab. There was a pointedness to it, a sense that she was hinting at bigger trouble swirling around Lively. Handler didn't mince words. She joked that there would be no sequel to the nonsense that had apparently tainted Lively's projects. The comedic lashing was so direct that even on a stage known for roasting celebrities, jaws fell open. In just a few sentences, Handler had managed to single out Lively's ongoing scandal and suggest it was nothing more than a comedic spectacle to the entire industry. The cameras panned through the crowd, catching glimpses of shocked faces, some stifling laughter, others quietly whispering with the people seated next to them. When the broadcast ended, rumors ran wild backstage. People claimed Blake Lively left in a daze, eyes glistening with tears, anger, or both. It wasn't just that Handler had taken a swing at her. It was the realization that the fiasco Lively had worked so hard to contain was now common knowledge. She was the butt of the joke on live television, and millions had watched it happen. Worse, by the time the clip hit social media, many who saw it didn't think Lively was an innocent target. They were already questioning her motives. But that wasn't the whole story. Before this humiliation, Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni appeared to be on friendly terms, so everyone believed. They were co-leads on the film It Ends With Us, adapted from a popular novel, and Baldoni was not just starring, but also directing. Early interviews showed the pair laughing together, praising each other's professionalism. Publicly, Lively expressed excitement about bringing this emotionally charged love story to life. She told journalists that her character was one of the most complex roles she had ever tackled. Behind the scenes, however, tensions allegedly simmered. Some crew members whispered that Lively wanted greater creative control. She wasn't merely satisfied with being the star. Rumor had it she was editing scenes in real time, challenging Baldoni's directorial decisions and pushing for her own version of the script. This was unconfirmed scuttlebutt, at first just typical on-set gossip. But as the shoot went on, those whispers grew louder.
He told us that Justin Baldoni claims she tried to take over his movie because she has a history of saying, okay, I'll be the star, but what I secretly want to do is direct it and edit it and produce it.
According to some, the first real fractures appeared when Ryan Reynolds' Lively's husband showed up on set and seemed to behave more like a co-director than a casual visitor. He would allegedly give suggestions to Baldoni, weigh in on camera angles, and propose changes to lines. If these stories are true, then the personal and professional lines were blurring. Baldoni, for his part, tried to keep the peace. After all, Reynolds was Hollywood royalty and a comedic powerhouse to boot. Still, the atmosphere on set became charged, and the tension between Lively and Baldoni quietly escalated. By the time film filming wrapped, a few tabloids hinted that the project had been troubled, but no one foresaw the magnitude of the storm to come. Lively and Baldoni still appeared side by side for promotional events, smiling for cameras until, quite suddenly, they weren't. Within weeks, hushed rumors turned into full-blown scandal once the lawsuits started landing in court. Something was brewing, and it was bigger than any typical Hollywood spat. In December 2024, headlines blasted. Blake Lively sues It Ends with Us director for unwanted behavior on set. The lawsuit read like a script from the darkest corners of a legal drama, alleging repeated episodes of harassment and intimidation. Lively claimed Baldoni crossed professional boundaries, engaging in unwelcomed touching and forcing kisses during a scene that she hadn't consented to.
That she became uncomfortable with Justin Baldoni yesterday while she was filming. She states that Mr. Baldoni put his bare hands on her backside and said that he was trying to help her with her posture. Complainant immediately voiced her displeasure with being touched on an intimate part of her body, and Mr. Baldoni responded with, "It's fine, I'm totally hot for my wife," in a dismissive tone.
She also alleged that once she voiced her objections, Baldoni retaliated by discrediting her to producers, blacklisting her from future projects, and feeding negative rumors to the press. In response, Baldoni denied everything, then launched a massive $400 million countersuit. He insisted that Lively's accusations were not just false, but maliciously concocted to cover her own ambitious overreach. According to Baldoni, Lively and Reynolds had tried to hijack the film, rewriting scenes, dictating production details, and overshadowing the director's role. When the final cut failed to bring the critical acclaim Lively hoped for, she allegedly shifted the blame onto Baldoni. The countersuit went a step further, implicating Ryan Reynolds, their shared publicist, and even the New York Times in a sprawling campaign of defamation. Baldoni's legal team argued that Lively had used her star power to manipulate public narratives, feeding false information to journalists and online outlets. This broad, high-stakes litigation was more than just a he-said-she-said scandal. It was shaping up to be one of Hollywood's most convoluted legal battles. If anyone assumed the situation would quietly settle out of court, they were wrong. Both sides doubled down. Lively's lawyers painted her as a victim of intimidation, suggesting that Baldoni was hiding behind well-funded legal aggression to muzzle her. Meanwhile, Baldoni's attorneys declared they had receipts, texts, emails, and even behind-the-scenes footage to prove Lively's claims were fabricated. With the stage set for a legal war, the real question was which side the court of public opinion would believe. At first, opinions seemed divided. People who admired Lively as an actress and outspoken figure on various social causes leaned towards sympathy for her allegations. Baldoni's fans, plus many in the industry who had worked with him before, expressed disbelief that he would engage in such misconduct. It felt like a collision of two public images that simply could not coexist. And then, the evidence began to leak. The first hint of crumbling credibility came when a mysterious website allegedly linked to Baldoni's team published snippets of text messages. These texts directly contradicted the idea that Lively was ever uncomfortable with him. In one message, dated April 2023, Lively casually jokes about adding playful, flirty banter because it was her love language. She even wrote that the banter would come off yummy, spicy, and playfully bold never with teeth. These small phrases painted a jarringly different picture than the serious allegations in her lawsuit. Instead of sounding fearful or harassed, Lively seemed enthusiastic about intimate or flirtatious elements of the script. If these messages were authentic, they chipped away at her story that she felt coerced or threatened by Baldoni's behavior. More leaks followed, scheduling emails where Baldoni insisted on hiring an intimacy coordinator, Lively's breezy replies agreeing to meet with that coordinator, and even grateful-sounding notes about how safe and professional the shoot felt. It was impossible to reconcile these friendly, cooperative exchanges with the harrowing claims Lively made in court documents. Perhaps the biggest blow to Lively's credibility came from none other than her husband, Ryan Reynolds. Baldoni's attorneys presented texts from Reynolds praising Baldoni's directorial approach, describing how much he adored him and believed the movie would be incredible. This friendly banter between the two men stood in stark contrast to the lawsuit's portrayal of Reynolds confronting Baldoni over serious misconduct and orchestrating a revenge campaign. One by one, these receipts painted Lively's account as inconsistent. Suddenly, industry insiders were whispering that maybe Lively had gone too far in her accusations. If her own words contradicted her claims, what else was untrue? As the leaks poured in, public opinion began to shift in Baldoni's favor. But for Blake Lively, the nightmare wasn't over. Her exposure was about to reach new depths. The worst blow to Lively's pride and possibly her entire career happened when Chelsea Handler's jokes exploded across social media. Handler mocked mocked Lively, calling her lawsuit a massive distraction for Hollywood. Within the same week, respected filmmaker Judd Apatow took a swipe at her from another awards stage, quipping that usually, to make that much money, you have to sue Blake Lively, referencing Baldoni's $400 million counterclaim. The audience roared with laughter. In an industry often quick to rally behind a performer who claims victimhood, the reaction here was unnervingly cold. Rather than applause or sympathy, Lively faced mockery. It wasn't just Handler or Apatow. Talk show hosts and late-night comedians began slipping in barbed remarks about her accusations. One joked that "It Ends With Us" might need to be retitled "It Ends With Lawyers." Another cynically suggested Lively's next role should be in a courtroom drama, since she was spending so much time in legal disputes. Viewers across the world watched these comedic potshots pile up, and they started to wonder, if the allegations were entirely true, would her colleagues be so fearless in poking fun at them? Public sentiment began to drift. It wasn't that people outright dismissed claims of harassment, everyone knows how serious those can be. But the glaring inconsistencies in Lively's story were becoming too hard to ignore, and the comedic takedowns turned her into an easy target. Industries run on perception, and in Hollywood, once an actor's credibility starts to unravel publicly, the freefall can be swift. Blake Lively's once sterling reputation as a beloved star and fashion icon was losing its luster. The meltdown was happening in real time, and it was being memed, joked about, and debated in every corner of social media. Still, that wasn't the end of her troubles. By the time the comedic roast settled, Blake Lively found herself in a precarious position. If she had any powerful allies left in Hollywood, they were keeping quiet. A small handful of Friends-like actress Jenny Slate voiced public support, praising Lively's bravery. Yet that show of solidarity was drowned out by a larger industry that seemed disinterested or outright critical of her. No new roles for Lively were announced. Rumors circulated that studios might be re-evaluating projects attached to her. Even her social media presence grew subdued, with fewer personal posts and more carefully curated statements likely prepared by her PR team. It was a stark contrast to her previous online persona, which had been lively, pun intended, and self-assured. Meanwhile, tabloids had a field day. Some media outlets went all in on the narrative that she'd gotten caught making false accusations. One headline read, "Leaked messages reveal Lively's web of lies." Another asked, "Is Blake Lively Hollywood's next big fraud?" The more serious mainstream press took a cautious tone, but they too highlighted the apparent contradictions between Lively's allegations and her own text messages. At the same time, Lively's attempts to silence Baldoni as a court motion to prevent him from releasing more evidence came across as desperate. While her legal team argued they wanted to protect the integrity of a future jury, critics suggested she was simply afraid of further revelations that might gut her case. Baldoni's side hammered that angle in public statements, saying, if she has the truth on her side, why fear more evidence coming out? In short, Lively was losing on multiple fronts: legally, publicly, and professionally. Hollywood can be forgiving of many sins, but a shaky story that humiliates major industry players tends to burn bridges quickly. For the star of one of TV's most iconic teen dramas to be laid so bare, it was a cautionary tale that even the brightest public persona can vanish under the right pressures. Yet in this same storm, Justin Baldoni was charting a very different path. Justin Baldoni never transformed into a braggadocious victor. Instead, he largely let the facts speak for themselves. Whenever he made a statement, it centered on how the evidence will exonerate me, and the truth is in plain sight. His strategy proved effective. Public sentiment veered in his favor, particularly when he released text messages revealing just how enthusiastic Lively had been about certain scenes she later described as threatening or forced. His lawyers also pointed out that no neutral witness had ever backed Lively's version of events. Not a single crew member had come forward to confirm her allegations, while Baldoni had multiple statements and digital footprints supporting his side. Even some of Lively's past supporters began to tread carefully, refusing to comment as the credibility gap widened. Friends of Baldoni, including his wife, offered public shows of support on social media. Birthday tributes praising him as a loving husband and father painted a picture of a grounded family man, not a vengeful Hollywood predator. Industry colleagues shared anecdotes about his professionalism and compassion, referencing charitable projects he'd led or the respectful environment he fosters on set. All this aligned with the carefully curated evidence his team kept releasing. They showed repeated efforts on Baldoni's part to ensure boundaries were clear. Documentation about hiring an intimacy coordinator, scheduling cast check-ins, and exchanging friendly texts with Lively. It built an image of a director who diligently upheld professional standards and felt blindsided by allegations he viewed as fabricated. By staying calm and focusing on transparent evidence, Baldoni won over many skeptics. Legal analysts praised his approach, saying the best way to fight false claims in the digital age is often with receipts. And receipts he had in spades. The more he published, the more Lively's claims seemed to crumble. At that point, many suspected that if the lawsuits ever reached a jury, Baldoni would likely prevail. But in the public arena, he was already emerging victorious. The star, once presumed guilty of serious misconduct, was increasingly seen as someone who had been unfairly maligned.
In Blake's first amended complaint, Blake changed what she alleges about what happened while filming the slow dance scene, now that the footage has been released for everyone to see. So what they're saying is, now that, Justin Baldoni shared the truth of what it looks like, they're no longer making the same claims. Previously, they said Miss Lively was filming a slow dance scene for a montage in which no sound was recorded. Of course, Justin proved there was sound. Mr. Baldoni chose to let the camera roll and have them perform the scene, but did not act in character as Ryle. Instead, he spoke to Miss Lively out of character as himself.
When Chelsea Handler turned Blake Lively into a live television punchline, it became the tipping point in a saga that had already spiraled far beyond a typical Hollywood feud. For viewers at home, that brief segment was more than just another celebrity roasted. Was the moment Lively's story began to crumble under the weight of evidence. The comedic jabs, the widespread laughter, and the industry's striking lack of sympathy signaled that the narrative she had constructed simply wasn't sticking anymore. In the aftermath, Lively's reputation plummeted with astonishing speed. To this day, fans debate whether she was ever entirely truthful, or if the truth might be more nuanced than either side acknowledges. Perhaps the reality lies somewhere in the murky middle, but the blunt fact remains. With leaked texts discrediting core parts of her testimony and colleagues ridiculing her claims, she stands precariously on the edges of an industry that once embraced her. As for Justin Baldoni, he continues forging ahead filming projects, releasing uplifting social media posts, and standing firm on his version of events. In many ways, he walked away from a situation that could have destroyed his career with a stronger public image than before. If anything, the scandal showcased his willingness to defend himself in a measured, evidence-based way, garnering respect from peers and fans alike. Of course, no one outside the direct parties can know every detail, but the fallout raises larger questions. How do we distinguish legitimate accusations from false ones in a world saturated with spin? And what responsibility does the public bear in not rushing to judgment when sensational stories break? In a matter of months, Blake Lively went from shining Hollywood star to an object of ridicule in late-night monologues. Perhaps the biggest lesson in all this is the power of receipt sand, the power of a single televised moment to flip an entire script. Because sometimes, all it takes is one pointed joke, broadcast to millions, to strip away the final illusion. And once the dust settles, only one truth remains standing. After all the lawsuits, leaks, and heartbreak, one thing is certain. Every claim, no matter how shocking or salacious, will face its reckoning sooner or later. In this case, that reckoning was swift, brutal, and broadcast in real time. Whether Blake Lively can ever fully recover from a tant, whether Justin Baldoni's triumphant public stance holds up in court remains to be seen. But Hollywood will be watching, and so will the rest of us, eager to see what emerges when all the evidence is finally laid bare.